Thought I'd put together a little video showing how to make the most of the files that we make available through the Distance Riders website for the North Island 1600 and North Island 800 events that we run each year. We try and provide as much information as we can reasonably give to you so that you can then make good and quick use of it without just spoon feeding everything to you in a way that you just simply import into your GPS and ride. We could do that, but that does take away an aspect of planning, which has always been part of the challenge in terms of these events, figuring out how you're going to have that information available to you so that you can ride the ride that you need to when you're actually doing it on the day. So we've left a degree of that challenge intact. So this video sort of hopefully will show you how to obtain that information and then work through it in a reasonably short period of time to make it usable so that you can ride what we intend you to ride on the day. We're going to start by opening up Basecamp. I presume at this point you've got Basecamp installed and that you've got some New Zealand maps installed as well, so that this would be usable. So right here we've got a lot of stuff already in our collection. It's probably sensible to start a nice clean fresh database for the purposes of this. So I'm going to go into General, go into the database set, hit New Database and add in NZDR North Island 1600. I'm going to copy that name. I'm going to browse and find my database location, which I think in mine is in here. Documents, Garmin, Basecamp. Okay, and then I'll make a new folder in there and call it whatever I want. Okay, having added that, hit OK and it will restart Basecamp for us. And when we get here, we'll have a nice clean slate to start from with nothing in there at all. Next thing I'm going to do is jump onto the Distance Riders website, and for the purposes of what we're doing here, we're going to use the 2022 ride information, which is downloadable from there, and I'm going to be playing with the 1600. So here you'll see that underneath the interactive map we've got a GPX file available for download. Okay, so in here we're going to start by adding in a new list, and we're going to call it North Island 1600, maybe call it 2022 because that's the data that we're working with. So and then we're going to go into File and import into that list. We're going to use the file that we downloaded from the website. And here you can see we've got start and end, and you can see that they're pretty much the same point. They're not identically the same point, but they are two different checkpoints. And then we've got all of the numbered and named checkpoints there, nicely laid out through there. And in addition to that, we've got a track. That's the standard content that we'll make available for you to download for any one of these rides. Now to make a route, select the start of it, hold shift down, click on the bottom, you'll select everything through there. We've deliberately named them in a way that will appear in order. You can right click and then hit create route using selected waypoints. Look at the icons on the left hand side. That will show you the difference between a route and a track. If you want to call it something which is a bit nicer than just the description of the first and the end one, then you can open up the route and you can change the name of it up here at the top. So I'm going to call this North Island 1600 2022 route. Alright, now we've got some different activities here. If you get straight lines between your points, then it will be using direct and not useful activity. If you use something like motorcycling, then you're more likely to get something that will follow a route for you. Now depending on, you can see here that these start to take slightly different preferences around some of the areas where we've determined where we'd like you to go. If you want to make the track a little bit more visible, open it, change it from a dark grey, make it something that you recognise, something like a blue for the track, and we'll make the route, for now we'll make the route red. Okay, so when we're looking at it on the map now, we can see that the red route is not following exactly what we want in the way of the track. Now, that's partly down, most likely it's down to routing options. which are attached to your activity profile. So I've actually got several activity profiles in here already. Let's just show you what I mean by that. Under here, you've got things like whether it's fastest time or shortest distance, avoidances, and so on as well. So I'm going to try moving it to faster time and see whether that gives me something that follows the route a little bit closer. Okay, so there's still definitely some work to do around the edges here to get it to follow what we want it to. You can zoom in and out on this by using the wheel on your mouse. So you can do things like that, zoom into an area. Yep, I'm using a Mac keyboard here, and generally it doesn't stop. It goes all the way in for you, and then you sort of have to end up having to apply a little bit of fine-tuning. Depending on what you've got selected up on the top bar here, you can, if you've got the hands selected, you can pan around the map and stuff like that too. So we can start to work with this. The good thing about the track, this track here, which is colored blue, is that this was designed by us, and this lays out exactly where we want you to go. Whatever you do in Basecamp, your GPS is not necessarily guaranteed to do exactly the same. So when you import this onto your GPS, you may get different results. By using a track and having the track displayed, that's a persistent reference of something that doesn't change. And if you can see that while you're riding around, it'll help you to know whether what you're doing on the day is along the roads that we actually intended you to ride. So the track is very useful to give you that visual reference as you go around the route. Interestingly, here you can see some of these things are deviating off in areas where I really don't understand why it's going off in those spaces. Right, I'm going to change this to the type that I use, which is motorcycling regular. Again, we've got completely different options here as well. So this kind of stuff can happen to you when you're actually trying to ride it too, which is why those tracks are actually really important to try and get them onto your GPS. All right, so let's leave it with regular. Let's just have a look at the routing options I've got set in here for regular. Okay, so I've got an avoidance for unpaved roads. That explains why it's currently trying to skirt around the forgotten highway. If I take the unpaved roads avoidance off and hit OK, it will reroute and we'll get a slightly different result. Okay, so now it's actually going through the forgotten highway area, which is much closer to what I want. All right, so that's something to start working with. Let's open up the route, and we can see here we've got the ability, if we want to set a departure time and a departure date. So this ride was, we left at on Saturday the 8th of October, and we left at 1 p.m. I actually left in the group, which was 1:03 p.m. So having done that, then we start to get some projected ideas. Depending on the speeds that I've got set up with this activity profile, you get some idea as to what time you're likely to flow through these checkpoints. All right, now this tick box down here, more info, is really useful. If you don't have it set, then you miss out on a whole heap of information that Basecamp will give you, and in particular summary details like this. So it's currently telling me that the route that I've got rendered by Basecamp is currently 1624. Now that will change depending on the shaping and so on. Any changes that I make to it, that will change. And also we've got a moving time and a total time, and they're currently both the same because I don't have any layovers. What we tend to do is we assume that when we hit a checkpoint, it will take us anywhere around 3 minutes or so to pick up a photo and so on as well. And maybe stop for a quick mess around in your tank bag or something like that. So typically we'd just work through these and put 3-minute layover times in each one. This is a personal preference. You could do more than this, you could do less than this. I know that some people aim to do their stops in 30 seconds, and we aim to do that, but the good thing about having a degree of time in each one of these is when you start doing more detailed planning for an event like the TT, and you might end up with 70 something checkpoints over the weekend. Each one of them will take time, and so by you actually having something in here for each one of them, you're less likely to completely blow through your timing and forget that each one, that it actually does accrue time. 3 minutes may be too much for you. Adjust it, do whatever you want. We like having this in here. We prefer to run ahead of schedule rather than behind on the day. We prefer to earn time, bank time, however you want to say it, and then we much prefer to say, hey, we're 23 minutes ahead. Oops, I missed that one. Prefer to say, hey, we're 23 minutes ahead, rather than, oh my god, we're 12 minutes behind where we thought we'd be. It can be a bit demoralizing if you're behind the clock, but if you're ahead of the clock, it generally tends to feel a bit better. Alright, so this is a 24-hour ride. So as it is right now, we've got no fuel stops in here at all. Some of these checkpoints are potentially fuel station. Well, they are fuel stations, so they're potentially fuel stops as well. We'll work through and put some fuel stops in here. Alright, so let's have a look. We're leaving at 1, and as it falls out, we're back in within the 24-hour period, and that should be self-evident just because it's taking 21 hours and 31 minutes to ride it, and with all those 3-minute stops, we're up to about 45 minutes almost worth of stop time, 42 minutes worth of stop time so far, just with those photo stops that we've just gone and put time in for. So, just the reason for showing you this more info set is when we're working through trying to figure out how far it is along the route before we'll need to stop to refuel, we can select points like this and have a look at the distance at the top, and then determine would we make it to the Fognomomina pub on a fuel range where our fuel tank range is, say, 250 k's. Well, the answer is no, you'd have to stop before that, and then you know where you've got to insert your fuel stops. Having done this ride and having done all this planning before, I know that we actually found it beneficial to stop at that Dublin Street Z station and fill up there, even though we'd only done 100 k's from Owakuni when we hit that point. The rest of it flowed on quite nicely from there. We operate to about a 300 kilometer tank range for the bikes that we've got in our riding group. We can all do that pretty safely every day. Even Stella on the R1 can squeeze just over 300 k's out of a tank full on the R1, so we know that we're pretty safe to plan up to 300. At times we will plan a little more than that where we absolutely need to, and when we start doing things like that ahead of time, we'll know that we've got to most likely pack a 5-litre jerry can in the back of one of our bags or something like that, so that we've got a backup in case we blow it. That we're not relying on other people. Alright, so these checkpoints, you can change the icons that are shown here. So each of these currently, they came through from our import file as photos because each one of these require a photo stop, but we could also start to use some other icons along here as well. Alright, let's have a look at this. Firstly, I think it's probably best for us to start looking at the route, and for us to try to get some of the red line, which is our route, to match the blue line, which is the track. And we can do that. Let's start at the beginning and work through this. So if I hit start, right click, show on map, and then zoom out a tiny bit from here, we'll see that the red line here is taking us around the back of the station. I don't really want to do that. So with the route selected, you can hold the Alt key if you're on a PC, or Option key on the Mac, and you can take your pan hand over to it and then pick it up and drag it and drop it, and you end up with this little dot there, which is called a shaping point. So by dragging these things around and dropping them, you can end up putting several shaping points along the route that you want to go on, and you can determine where it's actually going to take you. So for the purposes of recreating the route that we had given to us, I needed to put those shaping points in around Oakuni. It looks like it's trying to take me up St John's Hill. No, north of there, sorry. Which doesn't make any sense. That's along Brunswick. Okay, that's crazy. So I'm going to drop a point there. Just follow the route round. It doesn't take us too long to do this. You can use scale. I'm actually quite happy with that variation. I'm not wanting to go through Stratford, and it's not really going to make any difference. It doesn't really make any difference to the distance travelled, and if anything, I would say that we're going to enjoy that more than heading into Stratford and battling through several roundabouts and traffic lights and then turning out that way. So I'm going to leave that that variation as is. This one to me makes no sense. I'm going to change that and move that down to there. Alright, that's good. So all I'm doing is holding the I'm on a Mac, so I'm holding the Option key down while I drag that over. This is using Windows version of Basecamp, so don't think I'm on the Mac version of Basecamp here, I'm not. Okay, so there's Tamaranui. Where are we going from there? Up through to Teaquiddy. Okay, 8 Mile Junction, through Teaquiddy, going northeast from Otahonga. Okay, these are following quite nicely. Here we've got a bit of variation. I do not want to go into the outskirts of Hamilton, if I can avoid it. No reason to. So I'm going to drag that and put a point in there. Okay, that's good. That's nice. Okay, do I need to go through the middle of Morrinsville? I don't think so. I'll happily go around the outside like that. I'll keep that in place. Again, you can use some judgment there as to whether it was something that we really wanted you to do or not. There is that amount of discretion is absolutely fine. Okay, now this is where it gets really kind of ugly and messy. I can see from the arrows that it must be going up this way and across, and I know from understanding the route and the checkpoint order that it does a figure of 8. It goes up here around the top, we do 25A twice, and then we go south. We'll come back to that in a minute in terms of how to make that useful on the GPS by using tracks. Now, heading back down through to Aroha, I'm going to just drag that over and drop that there. Okay, that then created a variation here, and I do not want to go down that side. So over here and drop it on Old Taupo and see if that brings it in line. Mainly does, not quite. Let's get that back over there. And that one's annoying. Okay, whoops. That spun it round. I do not want that. Click on the north head up if you want to correct something like, oh sorry, no, the N to get it orientated back correctly. Okay, so this is going down the western side of Tokoroa. We're not going into Tokoroa. Western access, this is perfect. Through to Turangi, over the desert road, and then down this way. Okay, so we hit Cheltenham. Yep, hit Cheltenham. We go over the saddle, and then down through Woodville to this final checkpoint. Okay, on the way back it's obviously varying from what we want to do. We actually want to do that same thing but in reverse. So sometimes John will have put sections of the route like this in play deliberately so that we actually get some exposure to the other people on the ride, so that we pass them, go in the opposite direction. We can take an interest in where we're at within the pack and how far ahead some people might be and things like that. So alright, okay, now that's good. That means that I've managed to recreate the route as faithfully as I care to against what was laid out to us. So that's really good. Now this is now my route, and that track that we were given, I'm gonna replace that with my own track now. So before we do that, let's just have a look at the distance. So we're looking at 1615 kilometers, which is pretty close to what they wanted us to do. We can open the track and we can see how far that is. That's 1620. So I'm actually doing 5k's less, but it's still more than 1,000 miles, which is 1609. So I'm still pretty happy with that. Alright, so I'm going to make my own track from what I've currently got laid out. And I'm going to do that by right clicking on that and hitting create track from selected route. Okay, now I've got this one here which says, it's got the track symbol on the left, it says North Island 1600 2022 route. I'm going to change that to track. Okay, now this one's fine, and I could keep it there, but I'm not going to work with this anymore. I'm actually going to work with mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove it from my collection. Okay, so this is the collection, North Island, or the list, North Island 1600 2022. I've got this option here to remove from that. I've also got the option to delete. I'm not going to delete it, I'm just going to remove it. Now the effect of that is it shuffles it into unlisted data. Anything that exists in your overall database that isn't part of a list will appear in unlisted data. So if I ever need to go back to it, it's still there. I haven't deleted it, I haven't lost it, but it's also not confusing things or messing up my current working collection. Right, if I open up the track now, I want to give this some bright color, so I'm going to go with green. I'm going to change the route color now away from red. I have an intended purpose for red in a minute that you'll see. So I'm going to make this the route will be cyan and the track will be green. All right. Now, when it comes to these looping sections at the top, they can be pretty difficult to figure, especially where they overlap each other a little bit like this. They can be difficult to understand when you're actually in the heat of the ride, which way you need to go when various things overlap, because two intersecting lines with no directional context can be confusing whether you actually, which one of those you need to follow. So there's a pretty neat way of working through this now, and I'm just going to open up the track. This is the green one with the feet icon. Let's put my cursor in here, and then I'm just going to go page down, page down, page down. You can see the little circle showing me on the map where I currently am along the track. I'm going to move that up to, I'm going to go down far enough within the track that I end up on the area at the very northernmost section of this ride. So I'm getting close now. Okay, I'm going to stop around about there, and now I'm going to just go down and through with individual points. Now I'm getting close, so I'm going to stop here and going to click on show on map. Okay, now I think I'm still south of that point. I can zoom out a tiny bit. Okay, and this, yeah, so this shows me still heading north, and here is the toilet checkpoint right there. And what I want to do now is I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to divide the track. Okay, now you can see it's created two tracks. The first one still exists, and we're now on a new track called track. Okay, so I actually want to call this one, I'm going to call this one NI1600 hyphen 2022 track, and I'm going to call this one track 2. Okay, this is the second part of our track. I'm going to end up with 3 parts of my track, and the way I remember what color, I'm going to color them individually, by the way, and the way I remember what color I assign is it's green to go and red to stop, and in the middle blue is sort of a good intermediate color. So what I've got here is I've got the start of my track is green, the middle is now blue, and I'm going to go and further split the blue one into an ending piece which is going to be red. Before I forget, let's open up the original one and then just add the number 1 onto the end of the green one. Okay, let's go back into the second one. This is the blue one now. So my aim here is to go all the way to the bottom point here now, and then from there on the way back up, that final little leg is going to be red. Okay, so I can approximate it's going to be around here somewhere. Okay, I went too far. So I'm going to use page up here to go and find the point at the southernmost area of this track 2. It's around about there. Alright, now I'm going to right click, hit show on map, zoom out a little bit. I don't know whether I'm beyond it or not, so hang on, just about there, come on, there. Alright, so I'm just going to experiment, see whether I need to go down. Yeah, I need to go down, not up. And that's a great point. So I'm going to right click and hit divide, and that has left the blue one intact. Sorry, the blue one and it's created a new one which is called track as my third one. So I'm going to color this one red. I'm going to call this one North Island 1600-2022 track 3. Alright, I'm going to close that. I'm going to highlight the whole lot. I'm going to hit, okay, we'll show on map. You can see what we've done here now. We've got an element of green that comes down, goes through, goes all the way around. It shows us that we go up to there, then we change to blue and it comes around this way, all the way down to the bottom. And then we change to red and then it comes back up and it does that to finish. Now, when we're playing with these in the mapping software, we can click on them one at a time like this. And we can very clearly see what happens in those areas where it overlaps because it just shows us one at a time. On the GPS, if you leave them all shown, then you're going to get something like this. You're going to get areas where you don't necessarily know which one is going to overlay the other one. And so when you do import these into the GPS, it's important that you know how to turn them on and off. And if you can turn them on one at a time, then you can have that green line interacting with your visual map in a way where you can see where you're supposed to be going in a way that doesn't vary from what you're planning here now. If you're using the GPS to navigate on the ride and you're doing it point to point, your GPS might, for example, decide that it wants to send you down the Hamilton bypass or something like that, which, if you just follow the instructions blindly, will change the ride that you're having. You want to be able to try to do what you've just planned and what we've instructed you to try to do. And so that's where these tracks come in really handy. They can be shown as static colored lines on your map, regardless of what your GPS is telling you in the way of directions, and you can use it as a reference point to help you to decide that you're actually going to ignore the GPS on that turn and that you're going to carry on another 2 miles or 2 kilometers down the road before you take a different turning instead. And then as you do that, your GPS will go, oh, recalculating, and then more often than not, it will only take a few of those for it to fall back into line and then start telling you where you should really be going. So tracks are very useful, and they're very quick and easy to make once you've got your route laid out in the way that you want to. So that's always the first thing. Once I've nailed a route, that's always the first thing that I'll do. I've probably done it a bit prematurely right now because I haven't actually gone through and done fuel stops, and it makes sense for you to actually have a track that shows you exactly where you want to go. So that was probably a bit premature, jumping in and doing that first. Bit arse about face, but anyway, I just wanted to show you how to do that. Right, let's go and focus on fuel stops. So when we open the route again, we'll see that my shaping points that I put in there, when I moved things around, ended up creating 2 different shaping points, some that won't alert and some that are black rather than grey, and it would actually treat that as a next stop. We don't want them, so right click on them. You can select multiples by holding shift down and doing that. Right click on them and then hit don't alert shaping point. Okay, so all of these ones, we don't want them. Don't alert. Okay, that one's good. There we go, get rid of them. So these still help to shape where the route goes, essentially telling it, we know better than you do, we know where we want to go, make sure you go through these points. Alright, so we can go back up here now, let's have a look. I've already said that we figured out that it was beneficial for us to stop in Dublin Street, so I'm actually going to jump into the Dublin Street checkpoint here, and I'm going to change the icon. We want to stop for fuel, so I'm going to use these 2 icons here. If it's a plain fuel stop, we'll just do a gas stop. If it's a petrol plus, then I'm going to be expected to take a photo of that one too. Alright, so I've changed that in the main collection, and that has an effect now in here as well, and also on the map. Okay, so as we're working through, I'll know that I've filled up in Oakuni as I leave. I've now got 101 kilometers before I manage to get fuel again. Alright, will we make it to Taranui? Yep, we will. So, as I said, we plan for around about or just under 300 Ks. So that BP to go Taranui stop, that also becomes a fuel and bonus point stop. So I will make that a fuel plus icon, and that's all that I need to do for that. So opening this up again, Okay, so the first fuel leg is 100 kilometers, 101, from Dublin Street down to BB Tamanuri, 265. Okay, so let's have a look now. Will we make Tyra 287? Perfect. Okay, that's great. That's another fuel stop for us then. So checkpoint 5 also becomes one of them. Okay, back into here. 287, brilliant. Okay, so will we make it to the top of the Coromandel? Easy, it's only 55. Will we make it to Royal Oak? Yep, no problem. Whangamata 193. Okay, now I've heard, and we had heard, that Whangamata is not a 24-hour fuel station. And we're getting in there, it's indicated that we're going to get in there at around about 1 o'clock in the morning. Alright, now the other thing that I'm going to do before I get too carried away here is I'm going to start to allow a little bit more time for those stops, which are both photo stops and fuel stops. So we're going to increase them to 10 minutes. And this one here to 10 minutes. May or may not be enough, but at least we've got something in there. Gold Tyra, 10 minutes. Okay, so we're likely to blow through Whangamata. If you want to change what you see on the map, if you're multi-selecting like this, you can then hit right-click Show on Map, and that will show you with orange highlight what the current section is. So that's that. You can see it changing as I extend it. There is a setting here, Center Map. If you have that ticked, that will likely create a nightmare for you, because if you do that and then you click on anything like this, it will self-zoom, and that may or may not be what you want. I find, to keep me sane, I prefer more direct control over when it changes its view, so I untick that, and then when I need to change the view, I will right click and hit Show on Map, and that will take me to a zoomed set. Okay, so from Gold Tyra, now I've got these shaping points which aren't anywhere in particular, but that one there is 266 kilometers, which is fine. I think we should probably start looking further afield to figure out how does the point that we choose now interact with further on in the ride. So rather than just dropping something immediately, let's have a look down. So the reason why I'm doing that is because of the time of day as well. We're starting to get into the time frames where we know we need to start looking for 24-hour fuel stops. So Whangamata won't do it. What have we got in the middle? Well, Te Araha might have. I'm pretty sure there's one in Waihi, so I'm just bearing that in mind. But what about further down? When we get to some of these sections down here, let's just have a look and remind ourselves where we're going. We're pretty much off route down Old Taupo Road and Western Access. There is one in Turangi. That's useful. Okay, so what if we aimed for one in Turangi? Would we get, say, from Waihi to Turangi? Because Turangi is a Z24 hour, and if Waihi is as well, then that leg there might be of a good distance. Okay, so let's inspect that. Let's try that. So the easiest way to do this is to zoom in on Turangi. I'll close my route down so that that's not in the way. Okay, now we know where the Z is. I think that's the Z there. Let's have a look. Let's click on it. Yep, there's the Z energy. All right. So if you find something like this that you want to potentially include in your route, then click on it, click on the name of it, and then you'll get these extra little options up. And this one, create waypoint from selected result or at selected result. This is a really good option. So do that, and it's titled it Z energy for us already. It's not a particularly useful icon with the flag, but anyway, if we click in it, it's got the coordinates, it's got a name. Doesn't necessarily have the place name, so I like mine to be labeled a little bit more usefully, so I'll add stuff in there like that. And then just to make sure that we know what we're looking at in the list, I'll go and put a non-photo gas station in there, and then I'll close it down. All right, several ways of getting this into the route. One is to click on this and highlight it, and then use a Control-C copy, and then you can go into the route and paste it where you want. there is a nicer way, and I think this is beautiful, so let's show you this. Select the route. Okay, with the route selected, I've got up here, I've got my route editing icons, and if you hit plus and then move the icon down here, okay, you may need to go out a little bit. Okay, there we go. So it's giving me options, and it's giving me options for legs within the route between the checkpoints. All right, so what I want to do is I want to add that Turangi one into this leg. So using the plus insert tool, go and find the, so I've selected the route, I've clicked on that, I'm coming down here, I'm saying this is where I want to edit it. So click once there, and then it gives you the ability to go and select something to add into it. So I'm going to hover over the Turangi Z. It confirms that I'm actually selecting on that waypoint by the name popping up. Click on add, and then that's added it into the right spot. Okay, now I can continue to add bits using that, but I'm going to click escape here and get rid of that tool for now. And I'm going to deliberately put my pan tool back in, and then open up the route option. And let's have a look what it did. So we've got Tairua, and then we've got Turangi, and that's 476, so that's way too much. But we were talking about possibly stopping in Waihi. So let's go and do the same as we did for Turangi in Waihi. Let's go and find that 24-hour fuel station. Now I happen to know Waihi's here. I think it was a BP, and it was just to the south of where we were popping along the route. So I think it's around here. Now, if you're doing what I'm doing here and you're zooming but you're not seeing stuff, then you need to increase the degree of detail visible in your map. Okay, so I think this is the 24-hour BP. Yeah, so there's the BP. If we're not sure if it's the 24-hour one or not, or if we want to go into Google Maps and check it, then follow along with me here. So I'm going to add the waypoint again. That's added that BP in there. I'm going to open it. I'm going to copy Waihi up into the name. Let's just call it, and then I'm going to put 24-hour, but I'm going to check it. I'm going to change this to a non-photo checkpoint. I'm going to copy the GPS coordinates to my clipboard and close that down. All right. So let's go to maps.google. google.com. Just paste that straight into the search box, and it's dropped the point there, and you can see it's pretty close to, oh yeah, it is the BP, and it's a Wellbeing Cafe. So if we click on it, let's have a look what it says. Open 24 hours. Great. Perfect. So we've just confirmed that that is a sensible place for us to plan to stop. So back into Basecamp, and what we'll do here with the route again is exactly what we did last time. Click on the route, we'll hit that plus option, we'll zoom out until we can see something. Okay, there we go, it's that leg. Click, drop it onto there. Alright, and then escape, put the pan back on, open up the route and have a look. BP Waihi. Alright, so from Tairua down to Waihi 222, that's fine, we can do that. From Waihi down to Turangi 24 hours is another 254, that's fine, we can do that. And then we have to start looking further down. So looking at this, 292. Okay, so we've actually hit the south of Pahiatua checkpoint at 231. But before we get up to Cheltenham, we should be looking for something. Okay, so it's somewhere along this leg that I'm going to need to insert a fuel stop. Okay, so we've got Ashurst. Just off route, there is a card operated Allied. I think it's an Allied in Ashurst. So that's an option, but it does take us off route a little bit. It's not much, but if we can avoid any extra detours and deviations, it's probably a good thing. So this is the one I'm thinking of here. Yeah, this Allied here. So that would take us it's not much, like I say, but I just don't want to do it. Don't need to do it. Woodville. Okay, there's the Caltex in Woodville. here. That one, I think that's that one. Yeah, Caltex. All right, so let's do the same again. Add that Caltex Woodville, and then non-photo checkpoint. Copy the coordinates because we're going to do the same again. Before we trust it, I'm going to go and check the hours of operation. Google Maps is definitely the easiest way to find this. Okay, that's interesting too, because it's showing that my checkpoint is slightly out. Alright, so Caltex, click on that. Oh, it's 24 hour. Perfect. Let's show you how to get coordinates out of Google Maps. If I want to change that and move that checkpoint just down the road to where it actually is, right click in Google Maps, and the first thing it will give you is a set of coordinates. I know they're not the same format, it doesn't matter. Click on it and it will copy it to your clipboard. Come back into here, open up the checkpoint, paste them in instead, move off it, and it shifted it. Cool. Alright, I'm going to show you this time. I'm going to click on the checkpoint option here, and I'm going to hit Control C or Command C. So I've copied the checkpoint. Now I'm going to go into the route. I'm going to go down to the South of Paiatua one. I'm going to go to the next one after that, and I'm going to hit Paste. And that's put the Caltex now after South of Paiatua. So I said we needed to have a fuel stop on that leg, and we can see, dunk, 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 it has done it. The reason why it's showing straight lines at this point is because I've just gone and changed the route, but I haven't yet recalculated. If I hit recalculate, it'll bring everything back into lines for us. There we go. Okay, what's going along? This is now changing a route, and this does not know that we can't go through the gorge. Okay, so that's a bit daft. I will have to move that. We can do that by shifting and dropping a point. Alright. Good stuff. Alright, so let's check the, so that's Turay to Woodville, 2:49, I'm happy with that. Can we get all the way home, or do we need to stop in Z? Well, we can make it to Z, it's 1:38, but actually we can, yeah, we can get all the way back up to Owakini, because it's only 2:37. So there's my fuel stops. All my fuel stops in my route, all done nicely. So, in terms of planning on the night, that's how far I would take it. If I wanted to use, if I was at home and if I was doing this planning, then I would go and copy all of those checkpoint names and right click and hit copy, and then I would actually put a planning sheet together. So I'd open Excel up and start a new book and paste them, and that gives us all of the checkpoint names into Excel. Not all of them are stops, so these ones that were shaping points, I would delete them. Okay, like these ones, I'd delete them, delete them. Okay, so those are all my planned stops. You can see which ones are the fuel stops with no photos. I remember from those. Yep. Okay, so we're also filling up at the beginning, and it doesn't really matter, but we're also filling up at the end. So the ones that I've made bold there are our fuel stops. I have a much more extensive planning sheet that I use, and I transpose an awful lot of the timings that we've got in here over into that, which reminds me that I forgot to put extended times in for some of these. So let's just finish that off. So 10 minutes at that one, 10 minutes at Waihi. Okay, got 10 there, 10 there, 10 there. We need to put some in for Woodville. Okay, and that's it. So, as it stands, leaving at 1, and we'll be back in just after midday on the following day. So that's indicated by 23 hours and 1 minute total time, 21 hours and 28 moving time. Now, If you think that that's slow, then you can edit your profile under the activity profile, scroll to the bottom, adjust your average speeds, click customize, and you can increase these. Increase these to reflect more what you would likely do on those roads, and as a result of doing that, your timing across that activity will start to become a lot more accurate in terms of reflecting how long it's going to take you to do this. 16 Ks, I'm really happy with that. That's well within what we were hoping and expecting to do. Yeah, so I've now got a route. I've got all the checkpoints I need. I've included personalized checkpoints in here as well in terms of the additional fuel stops that we need to include in there. I've got Waihi, Woodville, and where's Tamarui gone? Down the bottom. Okay, now another thing that I tend to do is within the route, if I'm adding extras like this BP Waihi, I'll add that in with a name that will alphabetically sort it close to or before the next checkpoint that we're coming to. So this might seem a bit weird, but I'd put a CP09A in before CP09. Any of the yeah, so you can do that just by double clicking that and then opening this up and then typing in here like this. So I would name that CP09A. This one here I'd call this CP10A. And the Woodville one I would call that CP12A. This helps you not miss them and also not miss checkpoints. There we go. Yeah, so we've actually, the reason for not inserting that one as 9 and then making Curatao as 10 is because all of the documentation that they've given us will reference Curatao as 9. So you want to insert them between, but not and not replace the formal naming, so that any documentation that you've got doesn't mess with that. Right, now if I'd have done that before I started my my Excel sheet, clearly these fuel only stops here would have taken on those nicer names as well, so they would look more like this. Okay, so that's how my planning sheet would sit. Typically I'd then print that with all the arrival times and everything else, and the layover times noted on there, and that would get printed and it would be thrown in my tank bag, so I've got something I can refer to on the way around. And using that, typically if you've got an arrival time at the next stop, then you can compare the expected arrival time against the ETA on your GPS, do the maths real quick in your head, and that's how you can tell whether you're running 12 minutes ahead or 23 minutes behind. It's that easy. Alright, so the next part of this is how to get this meaningfully out and onto the GPS. If you're using a Garmin, then the waypoints included within a route will be exported with the route itself, and these individual tracks, one of the reasons for splitting these up as well is to keep the overall point count of the track points down below 15,000. Garmin, so if you open it up and have a look, you've got points 8,462 in there. The second one is a big one. Oh, well, it's not as big as the first. 6,832. They're both fine. Garmin's have typically got a limit in terms of how long each track can be before it starts to truncate it and not show it, which is a real pain. If you were to try and bring this in and use it, then as you can see, there's 27,594 points. It would get 2/3 of the way around that and then go, no, not showing anymore. Which, if you're using it as a reference when you're riding, is a real problem. So there are some ways of dealing with that. If we want to duplicate it, I'll show you one way of dealing with that. So with this one, if you open it, then where is that tool? Is it filter? Yeah, okay. So you can go automatic, fewer points, more points, or you can actually do maximum points 15,000. Make it slightly less. Make it something like, okay, well, so it wants only 10,000 as biggest. Okay, so let's use 10,000. Okay, if you want to leave the original track, you can do that, and then this will create a new one. Alright, so this one now has got 7,724, so it was able to actually make something potentially usable with that small account. The detail, the fidelity of that track does take a small hit, and it may not trace the roads exactly like the original one did, but for the most part it'll be perfectly usable. So if you wanted to take an original track and make it small enough to use directly on your GPS, that's how you can do it. Just check the overall point count is less than 15,000, and typically the Garmin's will cope. You can see though, by not splitting them up, you lose that ability to see which way around you're supposed to go, so I do recommend you playing with that. Alright, so to export this and make it suitable for the GPS, all I would do is select on those last 4 items and then go File, Export, Selection, find somewhere, and then go My North Island 1600 collection. Okay, save. If you do want to be able to play with these things so that they only include waypoints, sometimes that can be useful, then just select the waypoints and go File, Export, Selection, and go North Island 1600 waypoints, make a GPX of that. If you want just the tracks, Export Selection, okay, and that should be usable. So from there, however you get that content onto your GPS is the next step. If you're using a Garmin Zumo XT, I'd really recommend that you have a play with, explore, and see what Garmin have in mind for you in terms of how they envisage that you might want to try to start using your Zumo XT. Explore is a cloud-based, so an internet-based ecosystem where you have your own account in the cloud with Garmin Explore, and you manage your content through the Explore cloud services, and then your Zumo XT just syncs directly through from that. So seamlessly in the background, it attempts to pull the content back out of the cloud onto the GPS. So you can use your phone app to do that. That's the way I'd recommend. You can use the Garmin Explore website to try and do that. It doesn't work as well as the phone app in my view. I would advise you against that. If you use the phone app, then all of those custom icons that we've just been playing with here, they stay intact, they get regarded, and they will make their way through onto the Zumo for you. If you go through other methods, then typically a lot of these custom assigned icons just get replaced back with that dull blue flag, which is an annoyance. But going through the Explore application on the phone will actually allow you to keep hold of them. There's a few articles written on my website, www.wiltshire.net, wiltshire.net, about the Garmin Zumo XT, and in particular some of these Explore options to play with, explaining the difference between this particular GPS, the Garmin Zumo XT, and a lot of the older GPSs. This one's based on an Android operating system, and there's several quirks to do with this one that mean that they can do things differently, and that they are actually trying now to extend different options in terms of how you work with and interact with your GPS, including this Explore option. From here it gets a little bit more detailed, a little bit more intricate, but hopefully that's given you an insight as to the kind of things that I would be doing on that Friday night after that briefing, in terms of taking the content off the website and playing with it within Basecamp in order to make this specifically useful to make sure that we can get around on a 1600 ride through the night where not all the fuel stations will be open, and to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing when we're out on the road, where we're supposed to be going, where we're supposed to be stopping, what time we're supposed to be there, whether we're ahead of our time schedules or not. And it's only with all that information that you can absolutely know for sure, as you're riding it, that you're on track to finish it. And also how much spare time you've got. So, you know, if you were to experience a puncture, and if you were running 45 minutes ahead of your planned schedule and you knew that you had an hour's slack, then you know you've got an hour and a half of window that you can eat into, without necessarily then needing to change or adjust the rest of the speed of the ride that you would need to do in order to get home in time. Things like that. It's all about knowing where you are and being organised so that you know what you've got to do for the rest of the ride. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting and useful. I hope you may have picked up the odd basecamp tip along the way as well. Yeah, so good luck with it, and hopefully you've been able to follow through this and do something similar in prep for next year. All the best. Thanks.